Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I'm your host, Chris, and this is a show about all things movies and TV. We head back to the MCU for another Marvel Friday episode with Avengers Age of Ultron, which means we're almost done with Phase 2. We have Age of Ultron today. Next week, we'll do Ant-Man, and then we'll kick off Phase 3 of the MCU with Captain America Civil War, which I'm super excited about. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies of all time. But today we're going to focus on the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, where the Avengers fight the Ultron program that Tony and Bruce created in the MCU. So a fun episode for y'all today. We'll start off with a couple of news items that came out, along with another film reaction, and we'll get into that featured film, Age of Ultron, and then we'll wrap things up like I always do with the ranking segment with the villain scale, MCU ranking, and the popcorn rating. Before we get into all that, though, a couple reminders at the top of the episode. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com/thecinematicreviews. You can also listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast listening service, as well as watching the video version on Spotify now. That's right, you can watch the show on YouTube and Spotify now, whichever one you prefer. You can also check out the show on all the social media platforms, Facebook, X, and Twitter. I post all the artwork from each and every episode on there, as well as other news items that came out. I put a post on Doomsday, which is the newest event coming in 2026, similar to what we had with Barbenheimer, where Barbie and Oppenheimer came out the same weekend. 2026, we have the same thing with Avengers Doomsday and Dune Part 3 coming out on the same weekend. So they have slowly been labeling that Doomsday in the month of December this year. So it's a lot of excitement to get ready for. I'm recording this episode a little bit ahead of time too, since I will be in Mexico for the next week for my birthday. So if any news items breaks, this episode will not have it. We'll cover it on the next episode, but I will post on the social media sites as well as any major breaking news come out when I am down in Mexico. So with that, let's head over to news and reactions with the two tidbits of news and then that film reaction, The Running Man. So the first bit of news I have is Dylan O'Brien is reportedly in talks with Marvel for a major role. Now, there's nothing else really to add on to this, just that it was, quote unquote, a major role within the MCU. Now, my brain first went through the X-Men, because as we known from what Kevin Feige has stated the last couple of years, the next phase in the MCU will be mutant X-Men based. So my theory on this would be that Dylan O'Brien would be part of that X-Men team, whether it be Cyclops, maybe even Wolverine or Iceman, something along those lines. But I think my guess would be it'd be X-Men related. So we'll update you as soon as we get word on which role that is. But he is heavily rumored to be signing a deal with the MCU very, very shortly. Dylan O'Brien is an actor that I absolutely love. I think he's very underrated. He was actually my pick back when Zack Snyder's DCU was going on, of being his Robin. Unfortunately, that ended up not being the case. I think he would have been a great Robin, but I also been wanting him in the Marvel universe as well, because I think he's a terrific actor. He would fit the mold for many number of heroes within the Marvel universe. I think if I were to pick one to kind of like fan cast him right now, I think he would be a pretty good Cyclops. He could even be a really good Wolverine if that's where they went. But if I were to put money on it, I'd say he'd probably be the MCU's version of the Cyclops. I guess we'll see what happens to James Marsden's Cyclops in Doomsday, because he is supposedly coming back in that role. But TBD on what Dylan O'Brien will sign with Marvel, and you can count on me posting as soon as that happens on all the social media platforms and talking about it on the show. Another bit of news that was very, very surprising the last few days. Jackass is returning for a fifth movie. It'll release on June 26, 26. Not a whole lot has been said on this, just that it has been given a June date of this year. So Jackass will be returning to the theaters with Knoxville and company along with it. Very, very excited. I love Jackass. We did the fourth movie on the show actually when that came out, Jackass Forever. Now we're getting a fifth one here. It sounds like it's just going to be named Jackass 5. I haven't heard anything else on if they're changing a title, kind of like Jackass 4 did. Let's see if there is any other news items here before we move on. Looks like Bam is confirmed to return, but in more of a unseen archive footage based. You know, that big feud between him and the Jackass franchise corporation, whatever you want to call it, has been legendary the last few years, but it sounds like he has been given the confirmation and the okay to be featured in Jackass 5 through unseen archive footage. So that's very, very fun to see. But yeah, it looks like they are just going to name it Jackass 5. Knoxville announces it about 4 days ago on June 26th. So yeah, Jackass 5 will be coming to theaters this summer. So very, very exciting. Today's movie reaction is one that I've been really, really excited about. We finally got to able to watch Glenn Powell's The Running Man. This was awesome. I ended up just buying this. I didn't get to make it to the theater to see this one, and I'm very disappointed that I didn't because I absolutely really, really like this movie. It's awesome. It gives a good homage to the original Arnold Schwarzenegger version, but it also kind of makes it his own thing. It's a lot different, but it's also not a lot different, if that makes any sense. That's the best way I could word it. It's his own thing, but it does pay homage to the original. I mean, we see Arnold Schwarzenegger in here on the dollar bills, so it's kind of a legacy sequel in a way to where his character is now on the currency. Now, maybe that's just kind of a wink wink and not really a franchise tie-in, but I like to think of it as kind of just continuing this Running Man universe of having him as the currency. But who knows for sure what the idea behind that was, but it was really cool to see Arnold in here at some capacity. But Glenn Powell is an actor that I've been really, really enjoying the last few years. He plays Ben Richards, the main character in here that gets thrown into the game show The Running Man, where you have to outlast these hunters and the rest of the world to win $1 billion. It's very, very exciting, very violent. It's pretty wacky. Glenn Powell's is doing the Glenn Powell thing where he's angry, he's whimsical, he's hilarious when he needs to be, but most of the time he's just pure anger, and he plays it very, very well. I couldn't really see anybody else playing this role. I mean, maybe Tom Cruise could have been. I think Tom Cruise could have played a very angry Ben Richards, but Glenn Powell just kind of has that charm to him that even when he's pissed off and angry and ready to kill somebody, he has that really nice charm to him. And this movie definitely fits the mold of what Glenn Powell is now in Hollywood. It has a pretty stacked cast on top of that. Josh Brolin is in here as Dan, the kind of CEO, overseer of all these games, particularly The Running Man, which is his kind of featured game that people watch. William H. Macy pops up. David Zayas pops up. We also had, who else was in here? That might have been it for like big legendary actors. Lee Pace from Guardians of the Galaxy. We just talked about him as Ronan the Accuser. He pops up in here as the main hunter, McCone. So that's pretty interesting cast, especially the Josh Brolin scenes are pretty cool, where he's just kind of doing that Josh Brolin thing opposite Glenn Powell. It's directed by Edgar Wright, who is a director I absolutely love. He's done films like Shaun of the Dead, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Baby Driver, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. The World's End. He also did Hot Fuzz and Last Night in Soho. He's done so many iconic movies, and then you can add The Running Man to the list for sure. He was set to direct Ant-Man in the MCU, but then that ended up going to someone else, and he was still an executive producer. We'll talk about that more next week on that whole controversy of him directing Ant-Man. But he has quite a resume, and now he can add The Running Man to the list. This came out back in November 14th, 2025, so it really didn't have a long theater run. Nowadays, it seems like these films are getting about a good month or so before they're hitting on the streaming services. I ended up paying $20 for it, like I said, and watching it at home. But this is a movie that I wish would have watched in the theaters because it's got a lot of action, a lot of charm, and intensity, which is great. Surprisingly, it didn't do too hot in the box office, which is probably why it didn't go past the 1 month mark. It had a budget of about $110 million, and it only grossed just shy of $69 million worldwide, which is pretty much half of what it cost to make it. So you could consider that a huge flop. Will it be a franchise? I guess only time will tell. It could be a streaming sensation. Seems to happen a lot with, the theaters. Now, granted, this came out around the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then, Wicked came out, Avatar came out. Not making excuses, but there was a lot of other heavy, bigger blockbuster movies that came out around it, so it kind of just got slaughtered. If this would have came out maybe in the summertime or early spring, probably would have performed better in the theaters, but with it being that fourth quarter part of the year around Wicked and Avatar, which were one of the most anticipated films of 2025, it kind of got annihilated there. But it's still a really great film. I wish I would have seen it in theaters. Definitely check it out. It's currently able to buy. I'm sure one of these streaming services will eventually pick it up. Let's see who produced this here. See if I can find a studio here. It's starting to get a little trickier now finding the studio. Let's see here. Not see it on IMDb. I might have to Google this one. Yeah, let's Google it. Let's see which studio did this one. I can't remember off the top of my head of which studio owns The Running Man. Maybe it's... No, it's not Paramount. Let's check Wikipedia, even though I don't trust Wikipedia all the time. Paramount distributed it. Production company was Kingberg Genre, Complete Fiction. So this will probably end up on Paramount Plus, since Paramount's the one that distributed it, did the distribution for it. So probably, I'd say by February, we could probably see it hitting Paramount Plus. Grabbing the popcorn rating, I gave it 5 popcorn buckets. I really, really liked it. Glenn Powell is charming and angry, which I love. Michael Cera, who I forgot to mention as part of that all-star cast, is great. He's hilarious and kind of weird at the same time, but in an entertaining way, where they go to his house and it just turns into Home Alone for about 10 minutes when they fight off the hunters and the government trying to protect Glenn Powell's character. So that was really fun. I really like it when he's got the electrical stuff on the floor and he uses a super soaker to evaporate the government agents that come in there. It's really, really cool. That's probably one of my favorite scenes in there, was that Home Alone house scene, along with Glenn Powell just kind of running around angry, pissed off. And that was a really cool feature too, that the first Running Man didn't really implement, because, well, today, with social media and subscribers and all that, it made sense putting this in here as one of the tropes of it, where every day you have to videotape yourself kind of talking yourself, the audience, through your experience on the Running Man. And most of the time it's Glenn Powell, angry, pissed off, giving some really big speech about how this entire system is screwed up and unfair to the working man. I love that scene where he's in the first video and he goes, "They didn't really give me a time or what I'm supposed to do with these videos, so you're just going to watch me take a nap." And he just flicks him off. There's a lot of flicking off and giving the bird in here, which I love. It's part of that charm that Glenn Powell brings to the movie. But definitely an awesome movie. Go check it out. You'll probably have to buy it right now until, like I said, it's probably going to hit Paramount Plus shortly in the next few weeks to a month. So definitely check it out. It sucks that it was a flop in the theater, because I really, really enjoyed it. So check out The Running Man today, currently streaming at your home. Let's get into our feature film of the day, Avengers: Age of Ultron.
I'm gonna show you something beautiful. Everyone screaming for mercy. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change. You're all puppets, tangled in strings.
It's the end. The end of the path I started us on.
Nothing lasts forever. There are no strings on me.
So before we get started, I want to just shout out that trailer. That trailer was one of my favorite trailers ever. When Age of Ultron was coming out and they were releasing all these trailers with James Spader's Ultron, and we'll talk about James Spader quite a bit today. That trailer got me so hyped for this movie that when I went to it opening weekend, it was such an incredible experience. Putting Ultron on the voiceover work for that trailer is freaking amazing. It hypes everybody up. It got everybody excited for what's going to be like a really dark Avengers movie, and it didn't disappoint because I really, really love Avengers: Age of Ultron. I think it's the more underrated Avengers movie of them, and probably one of the more underrated MCU movies. Period. I absolutely love it. I get the negatives towards it. You know, it was a lot of cramming in setups for Thanos and what Infinity War and Endgame would end up being, but you needed this movie to kind of start that battle between Tony and Cap, which would lead into Civil War, which is going to be really awesome to see that conflict go out and talk about it. But Age of Ultron is definitely one of the films that I think gets lost in that MCU catalog of all these projects that we've gotten over the years, and I really, really like it. I absolutely love Age of Ultron, and I remember going back, like I said, with that trailer being released back in 2015, 2014. Can't remember exactly when that trailer released, but it got me so hyped with James Spader voicing Ultron that it was just, I'm ready to watch a dark and gritty Avengers movie, and they didn't disappoint. It was really awesome. I just wanted to point out that trailer because the trailer is freaking awesome. That's why I included that one in the lead up to today's episode, because I wanted to have a reason to watch that trailer again, because it got me so excited back when this movie was coming out. So this movie came out back in May 1st, 2015. So we're coming up on just 11 years. So last year would have been the 10-year anniversary of it. It's crazy to think that it's been 10 years since Age of Ultron. It feels like just yesterday it was coming out in the theaters and we were jumping into phase 3 of the MCU. But then now here we are in the middle of phase 5, getting ready for phase 6. It's an exciting time to be a Marvel fan for sure. It had a budget of $250 million, which seems to be about what an Avengers movie would cost. I know Infinity War and Endgame cost quite a bit more just because of the cost of the actors, all the CGI, and everything else going on. But 250 million is quite a hefty tag. But they didn't really care because this made 1.4 billion dollars, which was a massive, massive hit in the theaters, and it deserves it because it was incredible. I absolutely love this movie. I need to watch it more, but I'm so glad that we get to see it this week and talk about it on the show. So to kind of give you a synopsis, get you caught up on where we're at in the MCU if you haven't seen this movie in a while. So the Avengers are they're a family pretty much at this point. They're doing missions together. This kicks off with them going after Baron Strucker, who we saw in the Winter Soldier. He now has the Loki staff from Avengers 1 with the Mind Stone in it, and he has been experimenting on the Maximoff twins, the Pietro and Wanda, who are Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch in the comics. Now, they don't call him Quicksilver or Scarlet Witch in here because of legal rights. You know, Fox at this time owned the rights to the Quicksilver name, so they just call him by his name, Pietro. And Wanda is just learning her powers. She hasn't become the Scarlet Witch yet, so they call her Wanda and him Pietro in here. But they are the Maximoff twins, which is very exciting to see them introduced into the Marvel because they are huge characters in the comics. Now, they're actual mutants in the comics. Here, again, with the rights of the X-Men being with Fox at the time, they had to call them enhanced, and they couldn't use the word mutant because Fox owns that part of Marvel, which sounds weird, but that's the truth of it. They had to stray away from them being mutants because of legal rights, but they are actually mutants in the comics, so that's really unfortunate that they had to pivot there. But it's still really great to see them get introduced to the MCU pretty early on in this journey of the Marvel Universe. So they're great. They are played by Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson, and we'll just talk about them here briefly when we go through the cast, but it was great to see them introduced there. And we're going to talk a lot about Ultron in here because I love that performance by James Spader. So speaking of which, let's just kind of get through the cast list here, and then we'll talk about some other things on our docket today. So Tony Stark, a.k.a. Iron Man, is brought back, played by Robert Downey Jr. once again. He is kind of in an interesting spot here where he is kind of co-running the Avengers with Cap, played by Chris Evans. They kind of have their squabble once again throughout this film, as they usually do. But he's with Pepper still. He's kind of doing his own thing with the Iron Man. She's running Stark Industries while he is Iron Man and with the Avengers, so that's really cool. Cap, like I said, is played by Chris Evans once again. He's been running missions with the Avengers as well. He's kind of the team leader, so to speak, here, with kind of co-leader is Robert Downey Jr. Thor, it returns, played by Chris Hemsworth once again. He's kind of, after the events of the Dark World, he now is doing missions with the Avengers as well. So he's kind of popping back and forth from Asgard to Earth, which is really cool. We don't get to see James Foster in here because of that tension between Natalie Portman and the MCU after the firing of Patty Jenkins, who was supposed to direct the second Thor movie, but they ended up not going with her and going with somebody else. So that really broke ties with her and Marvel. So we don't see Jane Foster again until Thor: Love and Thunder, when they're able to kind of reconcile their disagreements together. But we do get to see Thor. He's great in here as well. Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, played by Mark Ruffalo once again. We first saw him in the first Avengers movie. Now this is his second time playing the character. He's kind of doing his thing too. He is kind of like best friends with Tony now, where they're doing experiments together. They're working on different programs, which leads to them creating Ultron together, unfortunately, but with good intentions, but it ends up going bad. So we'll talk about that too when we get to Ultron here. Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, is played again by Scarlett Johansson. She's really been tied to Cap here since the events of the Winter Soldier. So him and her kind of had this really good friendship going on. She, of course, is best friends with Hawkeye, played by Jeremy Renner once again. Now, Jeremy Renner, he gets an interesting story in here. This came out of kind of left field when this movie came out, where it turns out Hawkeye, a.k.a. Clint Barton, has an entire family. He has a home life. Like, he's the only one of the Avengers with, like, a stable family life. He's got a wife, played by Linda Cardellini. He's got 2 kids. He's got a son and a daughter, and then he's got a son on the way. So he's like a handyman at home. He's built them a farm. He's always updating it. And so he's playing the role of the husband dad, which the rest of the Avengers are not. Tony is kind of in this toxic relationship with Pepper Potts, with her running the company and him being an Avenger. Cap is still kind of dealing with the not having Peggy in his life, of being frozen for 70 years. Thor, again, with Jane Foster, he's back and forth from Earth to Asgard, so they don't really have a relationship. Bruce Banner and Natasha kind of have their little chemistry going on throughout this movie. They don't really do a whole lot except for the kiss at the end. But so they kind of have this on and off type thing going on where they're trying to figure things out as a couple. But it seems like Hawkeye is like the only one with like a stable life outside of the Avengers. So that was really cool to get that kind of that scene from left field where we go to his house and they meet everybody. And I love that scene where Tony is meeting his family for the first time, where his Hawkeye's wife comes out and Tony's like, well, that's an agent. And then the 2 kids come around and goes, those are smaller agents, Tony kind of being flabbergasted that an Avenger has an actual family, outside of S.H.I.E.L.D. So that was really cool to see that Jeremy Renner kind of get the spotlight in this movie as being this family man outside of the Avengers. Kind of gives him a reason to fight too. And I love that scene between him and Lena Cardellini where they're talking and he's like, I want to quit, but I don't think I can because, because it's who I am. But these guys are gods, and what do they need me? I just shoot arrows. But then Lena Cardellini's kind of like, yeah, but they need you because you're kind of like the glue that holds them together. You know what it's like to fight for something. You fight for a family, and it gives you kind of realization or kind of a perspective on saving the world because he has a family. And it's really cool to see that later on in Endgame when Tony gets a family and he's talking with Cap and Natasha about bringing everybody back, and Tony's like, yeah, I want to bring everybody back, but my priorities have shifted. I have a family now. I have a wife, I have a daughter. Like, this changes everything. And that is really cool to see that early on in the MCU, where Avengers eventually do have families. Like, Hawkeye has a family, he has kids, he has something he's fighting for, and he has something that he can't lose. And it's really, really awesome. Again, tying it back to Endgame, where he loses his family with the snap, and he just goes ape shit and rogue and starts killing people because he can't stand the fact that he lost his family from the snap, and it just destroys him mentally. And it's really cool to see that an Avenger, even Hawkeye, who was barely in the first Avengers movie and kind of just pops up here and there throughout the MCU, actually kind of gets the spotlight here in the second Avengers movie as this father family guy, and you kind of get to understand the Clint Barton character a little bit more. So that's really awesome that we got that chance to see him. We already mentioned Wanda and Pietro a little bit. So Elizabeth Olsen, who we haven't talked about in the MCU yet, let's kind of pop through her IMDb here shortly. She's been in a bunch of stuff lately. She actually starred in Godzilla right next to Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays her brother in here. They were actually husband and wife in there. So it was kind of interesting that they were in 2 movies together around the same time, but they were playing brother and sister in one and husband and wife in the other. So that's really interesting how Hollywood works with the casting. I think the first thing I ever saw her in was actually in the Winter Soldier post-credit scene where she was revealed as Wanda, and then Godzilla comes out and then she's in there. So it's like, oh, sweet. I remember her. She was at the end of Winter Soldier. Now she's kind of like one of the main people, and then she gets introduced fully as Wanda Maximoff in the MCU. And then she pops up in other MCU movies. Civil War, she's a huge part of. Infinity War, she plays a huge part in. Endgame, she's in there. And then she stars in her own show alongside Paul Bettany, who plays Vision. And we'll talk about him a little bit too. And WandaVision, which kicked off Phase 4 post Endgame. And she's phenomenal in there as Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda. And then Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is her next go around with the character, and she ends up being the villain. But outside of the MCU, then she starts getting into other things like Love and Death, the HBO miniseries about the church-going couples who are from the small town in Texas that ultimately start having an affair together, and it ends up someone getting killed with an axe, based on a true story. She plays Candy Montgomery in there, alongside Jesse Plemons, who she ends up having an affair with Alan Gore. But that was a really interesting series to watch. Then she pops up in What If, where she voices Wanda, of course. And then she popped up again in Marvel Zombies as Wanda once more to lend her voice. What does she have upcoming here? Looks like she's got a bunch of stuff in pre-production, but she's really been tied to the MCU lately as Wanda. Well, she's got Eternity, which came out last year. I haven't seen this yet, but I am excited to see it. This has Miles Teller, Elizabeth Olsen, and Callum Turner. This is the one where they end up going into the afterlife. You know, she has her husband when she died, but then her previous lover, and then she kind of has to go into the afterlife and pick one or the other. It looks kind of weird, but I love Miles Teller, so I'm going to watch anything that he's in, so eventually I will get to this one. But this looks like her most recent project was Eternity that came out last year. But otherwise, she's best known for as Wanda Maximoff, a.k.a. Scarlet Witch in the MCU, and she's fantastic. I absolutely love her as Wanda. She's really, really awesome. And then her brother, Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I absolutely love. I wish he was in more stuff. I remember first seeing him in Kick-Ass as Kick-Ass, which we've done on the show. Go ahead and check those out, those 2 episodes out on the show. Before that, he was in... he was in Kick-Ass. Then he was in Savages, which I didn't see till later on. Then he did Kick-Ass 2. Then he showed up again at the end of Winter Soldier as Pietro. Then he did Godzilla, like I said. And he returned for Age of Ultron. Then he did Nocturnal Animals with Jake Gyllenhaal, which is a really fascinating and awesome movie to see. Jake Gyllenhaal, Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Isla Fisher. It's got quite a cast. Armie Hammer was in there. Totally forgot about him. But Aaron Taylor Johnson kind of plays this scumbag who's kind of creeping on Jake Gyllenhaal's wife, or in the story that he's telling is the murderer. Then he did The Wall, which I haven't seen that yet, back in 2017. That was a military movie alongside John Cena. He was in Tenet, which I thought he was great in there. He did Bullet Train alongside Brad Pitt. He's fantastic in there. He was in The Fall Guy, which I wasn't a huge fan of. He did Kraven the Hunter, which, wasn't the best movie, but it could have been a lot worse. I think he was actually a really good Kraven Hunter that just kind of suffered from the script. He was in Nosferatu before that, which was really good. Then he showed up in 28 Years Later last year, which was the big movie that he was in, and he was really good in there. So he's got some other things coming up as well, but he's an actor I really, really like, and I think he's kind of underrated. And he got a lot of trash for his performance of Pietro, because at this time Fox was doing their version of Quicksilver with I'm drawing a name, Evan Peters, and everybody was just comparing the two. But you have to look at them differently, because it's 2 different takes, it's 2 different visions, and 2 different universes. And Marvel was really limited on what they could do with him because of the rights issue, but they were able to kind of get around it by just calling him Pietro Maximoff instead of Quicksilver. But now that Disney has now consumed the Fox company, now they can pretty much call him Quicksilver, and Evan Peters is just a variant of Quicksilver. So, but I really liked him. Now, I do prefer Evan Peters just because they were able to do a little bit more with him based on the story that they were telling. He's more of a really, really side character in here. But I like the suit. I like the blue effect when he's running. He did a really good job of what he was getting. I just don't think he was given a whole lot to do. Now, if he wouldn't have died in this movie, if they would have brought him back for multiple movies, I think they could have kind of tweaked some things and improved him a lot. So it's really unfortunate he was only in this movie and kind of limited to what they were able to do with him. But I really liked him here. So Ultron, let's get to the big bad here. Ultron, James Spader is freaking awesome. The voice, Now, the design of him gets a lot of hate. I didn't mind the design. I know it's not very comic accurate, but when you have a guy like James Spader, it's you kind of have to work with what you got and kind of give it your own take. Now, in the comics, if you're familiar with Ultron, his mouth isn't animated. It doesn't move. It's just like a apparatus, and it just lights up when he talks. That's kind of a boring movie. You kind of have to make him a little more animated to make it a little more entertaining in live action screen. So that was a big issue that some of these diehard comic book fans had with the moving mouth versus the blinking light. Now, the Ultron bots, they do what Ultron was supposed to do in the comics, where it just blinks red when he talks. Not very entertaining, so I'm totally fine with them making his mouth animated and making him more of an actual character rather than just a robot. But James Spader has had quite a career. He's been in a bunch of things. Before he was casted as Ultron, I knew him as Robert California in The Office, as one of the owners of Dunder Mifflin Scranton, and he was fascinating as Robert California. Then he went on to do Lincoln, Age of Ultron, and then he went on this 10-year run with the show The Blacklist, which is really cool. He is a former thief, I think it was just a mysterious criminal who ends up working with an FBI profiler and helping the FBI catch the bad guys. Very similar to what was that one? I think it's White Collar with shoot, I'm trying to blank on that one. Who was it? But it was kind of similar to that, where they recruit a criminal to help out a lot. Yeah, White Collar with Matt Bromer. I can't believe I forgot about him. But yeah, so it was kind of similar to that, but it was like the FBI. So, but James Spader, the voice is what does it all. Like the speech that he gives at the party of the Avengers is just iconic, and it was really, really well done. I don't want to step on quotes and fun facts and iconic scenes, so I'm not going to dive too much into them. But James Spader is freaking awesome as Ultron. I really, really like what he did, what he brought to the character to make it really, really scary and creepy and very, very memorable performance. And just applauded to him on just nailing the Ultron voice. And it was just really, really awesome. It's one of my favorite villains to watch in the MCU as we go through here. It's really, really awesome to see him. And James Spader is an incredible actor. I absolutely love him. And I don't think they could have gotten anybody better for the Ultron voice. A couple of the other side characters we'll get into before we go into the other parts of today. Nick Fury comes back as Samuel Jackson. He doesn't have a huge role in here. He kind of comes back towards the end because he is in hiding after the events of the Winter Soldier. But he does show up. We get Colby Smulders back as Maria Hill as well. She kind of pops in and out. And then we get introduced to Vision, which is the new upgraded version of Jarvis. And Vision ends up becoming one of the Avengers and then having a relationship with Wanda. And that's where we get Wanda Vision. But Paul Bettany finally gets to come onto screen as himself instead of just doing voiceover work as Jarvis. He is now Vision, the kind of the love child between Jarvis and Ultron. And now he has the Mind Stone as well in his forehead, and he will be a huge part in Infinity War when Thanos comes for that Mind Stone. But Paul Bettany is really, really good. I like the design of Vision with the constant flowing cape that's gold. You have the red skin and all that. So he's really, really awesome. I love his power too. The part where he's holding the Thor's hammer was pretty cool, and then that starts the whole conversation between Tony, Thor, and Cap, where they're trying to like figure out how he's able to do it, and does that make him worthy? Can he rule Asgard? And I think they ended up, if I remember right, on the conclusion that if you just leave Mjolnir in an elevator and the elevator moves up and down, it's kind of the same thing. He's a machine. So, but that was a really interesting thing to watch. But Paul Bettany does a really good job as Vision as well, and he becomes a pretty important character down the road with the Avengers. This movie was directed by, once again, Joss Whedon, who I talked about on the first Avengers movie as a director I don't really like, don't really care for. I don't think he's a good director. But luckily, this is the last time that he directs anything in the Marvel Universe. The Russo brothers end up taking over the Avengers movies and some of the other projects with Captain America. But Joss Whedon doesn't come back, after he got pretty much roasted because of how he is on set and how he deals with actors, and just he's not very creative, and I just don't think he's a good director. So but he ended up giving us Age of Ultron, which is cool, but I still not a fan of Josh Whedon, and I'm glad that we don't get him anymore in the Marvel universe after this. So like I keep saying, this movie is very underrated. It's the more underrated Avengers film. If you ask anybody, rank your Avengers movies, this is probably on the bottom. This one is actually not on the bottom for me. I have the first Avengers on the bottom, and then I have this one above it, I believe. Let me peek at my rankings. We'll go through the rankings here at the end of the episode, but now I'm kind of second guessing myself on how I would rank them. Let's see if I can find it here. Nope, I do. I do have Age of Ultron on the bottom. But that's just because the first movie is so iconic, and then Infinity War and Endgame are just untouchable. So it just kind of by default that this is on the bottom. But to me, it's a lot closer than you would think. This is probably much lower on people's overall Marvel ranking. I'm actually at a pretty good spot with this one, and we'll get into that later on. But I think it's a very underrated Marvel movie, very underrated Avengers film, but I really like it. You gotta watching it now after all these years later. You really do appreciate what it is for what it is, and what it was trying to do, and you really get to see the great performance by James Spader as Ultron, and which really does save the movie. If Ultron was performed very badly or very not thought out well, this movie tanks, it crumbles. It's one of the worst Marvel movies. But because of that James Spader performance, this is an incredible Marvel movie and an awesome Avengers film. Granted, I get it. There's a lot of stuff that they're throwing in here, but Marvel's been doing that for a long time. They just, at this point, they didn't really know what they wanted. They didn't know what they had. They didn't know which direction they wanted to go in. So they just threw in the Infinity Stones, and they were like, okay, we got to set up Thanos somehow. We got to get to this big war for the Infinity Stones, and they just kind of throw it in here. They freak out, and they just toss all this universe building in here, kind of like Iron Man 2 did. But I still really like it. If you focus on the story that you're trying to tell, where Tony and Bruce build this AI program, Ultron, and it goes rogue, and it realizes its potential and what the world can be and its own thoughts, then the Avengers get assembled, and they have to go fight this robot with this giant robot army. It sounds really ridiculous, but it's very entertaining, and I absolutely love it. Speaking of Infinity Stones, I want to do something a little fun here, where we just kind of track where the Infinity Stones we've seen so far. So we've seen the Space Stone, which was in the first Avengers movie. We've seen the Ether, which is the Reality Stone in Thor: The Dark World. We saw the Power Stone, or the Orb, whatever you want to call it, in Guardians of the Galaxy. We've seen the Mind Stone before, but it's been in Loki's staff this entire time. We actually get to see what the stone looks like this time as it gets put in the Vision's forehead. So we're going to count to Age of Ultron as the reveal of the Mind Stone, even though we've known about it since Avengers 1. So that leaves us the Time Stone, the Soul Stone, and nope, I think that was it. Power Stone, Space Stone, that's 2. The Reality Stone's 3. The Mind Stone's 4. Sticks, so we just need the Time Stone and the Soul Stone. The Time Stone we'll see in Doctor Strange, and then the Soul Stone we won't see until Infinity War. So we kind of get 4 out of the 6 right here, and then it's quite a while till we get to see another Infinity Stone with Doctor Strange, which I think comes probably 3 movies after this one. And then Infinity War is where we get to see that Soul Stone finally. So kind of a little bit of a Infinity Stone tracker there as we go through the MCU. Now I wanted to talk about these visions that Wanda gives the team before we get into iconic scenes, favorite quotes, and fun facts here. So the visions that Wanda gives, now watching it this time and with the Doomsday Avengers movie coming here shortly, I kind of saw these in a different light. So with Thor, he actually, in his vision, turns out that's Ragnarok. He's getting a vision of what's going to happen in Ragnarok, which is really cool to see now. Black Widow, she gets to see a vision in the Red Room. She gets to resolve that in the Black Widow movie, which is cool. Cap sees Peggy, which, as we know at the end of Endgame, he goes back in time. He stays in that timeline and is with Peggy for the rest of his life. Wanda, now we don't get to see this, but it is said a couple times what she kind of sees, and then as you watch the MCU, you start piecing it together where she sees her as Scarlet Witch, like she sees herself as Scarlet Witch in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So that's her vision. Now, the one I really wanted to focus on is Tony's. Now, when we first saw this, it was kind of insinuated that this is Thanos. Thanos is coming to kill the Avengers. But something has been bugging me ever since, and it's the fact that Tony didn't die in his vision. But we know that Tony dies in Endgame fighting Thanos, which kind of popped this theory in my head that what if Tony isn't just seeing Thanos? He's seeing Doctor Doom, where he is walking among the dead Avengers as Doctor Doom. And Doctor Doom ends up being this Tony variant that he thought he could save the world by becoming Doctor Doom. And he ends up killing the Avengers to save the world. Now, maybe it's a little thin. That's probably not where Marvel's going to go. But that theory just keeps bugging me. And I wanted to talk about it on the show today because that vision, just the fact that Tony didn't die in that vision just feels like they could set that up for something more than just Thanos. But granted, at the time, this was obviously a precursor to what Thanos was coming, and Tony feels responsible for the death of the Avengers if he does not Thanos. That's why he wants to build the Ultron program. That's why he wants a pseudo armor around the world, is to prevent the Avengers from dying so that he can save the world. He doesn't want to see his best friends die in front of him. But as Doomsday is coming, and with the casting as Robert Downey Jr., I wouldn't be surprised if Marvel and Kevin Feige go back to Age of Ultron and go, hey, Tony's vision in a different universe was actually him becoming Doctor Doom. So in that timeline, he becomes Doctor Doom to save the world, to be that suit around the world as Doctor Doom. And I think that would be a very entertaining route to go with if Doctor Doom ends up really becoming a Tony variant in that timeline. And now he is going from reality to reality and destroying the Avengers because he sees the Avengers as not the saviors of Earth, but the destruction of Earth. So I wanted to throw that out there, that theory out there, that this vision could be what creates Doctor Doom and his timeline. That'd be really, really awesome. So that's just kind of my theory for today. Let's head over to iconic scenes, favorite quotes, and fun facts. So iconic scenes. This was kind of tough because I had like 10 on my list, but I tried to keep these down to 5. So the first one is Avengers attempting to lift Thor's hammer after the party, which is a very iconic scene. This is what kind of sparks that theory that Cap can actually lift Thor's hammer, and we end up getting that resolved in Endgame when he does lift Thor's hammer to fight Thanos. But we get that really cool scene where Tony is trying to lift it. Then he brings the Iron Man glove in, tries to pull it. He can't do it. So him and Rhodey, together with their Iron Man hands, try to do it. They can't do it. It's funny when Mark Ruffalo does it because he's trying to do it and he's trying to turn it into the Hulk at the same time, but he can't. Then you have Jeremy Renner, who's Hawkeye. He tries to do it and he's just like, man, that's pretty ridiculous. And then in the background you have Tony like, it's fingerprints. Whoever shall hold Thor's fingerprints. And then that's when Thor is just like, it's a simpler solution. You're all not worthy. And it's pretty funny. And then that leads into our next scene here where Ultron crashes that party. And you get that epic speech from James Spader as that Iron Legion bot that's been kind of half-assed pieced together. And Ultron's talking through it. And it's really cool. It's such a great performance and just so creepy. And it was a great thing to add into the trailer for the movie to kind of set the tone for what this movie will be. And it's just truly, truly awesome. That's probably my favorite scene. when I think of Age of Ultron, that is the most iconic for me. Is that speech from Ultron as the Iron Legion bot coming into the party. Another great scene though is Hulk versus Hulkbuster, and this was an epic fight to watch in the theater. This was an incredible theater experience watching this, where Iron Man sends down Veronica, and I have a fun fact about why they named it Veronica, and I'll wait a little bit until I talk about that. But he shoots down Veronica. It's this big Hulkbuster looking Iron Man suit, and he's going to town on Hulk, and they're fighting each other through the city that they're in, and it's really, really awesome. You get some quips from Iron Man where he's punching the crap out of Hulk's face. Hulk spits out his tooth, and you get that reaction from Tony, just like, I'm sorry, and then the Hulk just pulverizes Tony, and it's just a really, really awesome fight. Bunch of chaos, of course, but it's a really, really awesome fight between Hulk and the Hulkbuster, which Tony obviously designed to contain the Hulk whenever he got out of control like this, where Wanda does her little magic on him to mess with his mind, and he goes berserk mode. The next scene I have is the Avengers fighting off the Ultron bots by the machine. This is like the slow-mo trailer shot where you got Captain America spinning around fighting the bots. You have Thor smash them with their hammer. It's just a really cool. You get the Avengers theme in the background going, and it's just a really, really cool moment to see Wanda and PHO and Vision becoming the Avengers, and they're all fighting together to fight off these Ultron bots. It's really cool. And then the last scene I have is the Quicksilver death, of course, where Hawkeye runs out to save this little boy that's in trouble. Ultron's coming down with the Quinjet. He's shooting everywhere with the machine gun. Jeremy Renner's about to die saving this kid, but then at the very last second, Quicksilver comes in, saves Jeremy Renner and the kid, but ultimately takes all the bullets, and he ends up dying. Very gruesome death, and this is like one of the big moments in the MCU so far where they killed an Avenger. Like, this sets the tone. This sets the capability of just killing Avengers off whenever they can, and the fact that they killed off Quicksilver, who is a new Avenger, of course, just kind of sets the record straight that they are not afraid of killing off Avengers, and it was a huge moment. So I always think of that scene when I hear Age of Ultron. But when I do hear the title, obviously Ultron crashing the party in that Iron Legion bot is the number one iconic scene for me, for sure. Absolutely love it. Some quotes here. I try to limit this a little down. There's a lot of great quotes in this movie. A couple of them from Steve here. You get hurt him back. You get killed, walk it off. I like that one. And then, of course, the iconic one when Steve yells language when Tony is swearing on their first mission, and it just kind of becomes a thing throughout the movie. It's really good. Like when Coley Smulders, they're at Jeremy Renner's house, and Nick Fury is there, and Maria Hill's like, he's like, "Hey, Cap," he said a bad word, and it's just kind of a joke throughout the movie. It's really great. Now, this quote, this is from Ultron. I have a couple of them, but this is probably my favorite of Ultron's. This is the part of the speech that he gives at that party. He goes, "Worthy? How could you be worthy? You are all killers. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change. There's only one path to peace, your extinction." I think in the trailer it says the Avengers extinction, but in the movie it actually says your extinction because he's talking to the Avengers. I think it was a really smart choice to change that in the trailer, though, just to kind of set the tone for the movie where it says there's only one path to peace, the Avengers extinction, which is really cool. This other one from Ultron, when the earth starts to settle, God throws a stone at it, and believe me, he's winding up, as that stone being dropping Sokovia on the earth and killing billions. Maria Hill, he's fast, she's weird, where she's explaining their powers, Wanda's and PHO's powers. She's getting all scientific, and she's like, he's fast, she's weird. Tony, I already mentioned this one against the Hulkbuster fight where he punches him, knocks a tooth out of the Hulk, and he goes, "I'm sorry." Another one from Tony, "You and Banner better not be playing hide the zucchini," as kind of a knock at Bruce and Natasha's kind of chemistry together. This one from actually Rhodey, who pops up in here. And this is at the end of the movie when he joins Shield and he's helping fight the Ultron bots. And Vision comes in and destroys all these bots around him. And he goes, "Okay, what?" As he's seeing the Vision. That was a really cool reaction from John Cheadle, excuse me. And then this last one, we don't have too many quotes coming from the post-credit scene, but this one's a really good one, and I always think back on it. So the post-credit scene for this movie was Thanos retrieving his gauntlet that he'll put the stones in Infinity War Endgame, and he goes, "Fine, I'll do it myself," insinuating that this is the start of him hunting down the stones for himself instead of hiring people to do it for him. So those are your quotes. My favorite quotes, probably the speech from Ultron for sure. Now I got some really fun facts here. I had a pretty cool time researching all these. So Scarlett Johansson was pregnant during filming, so many of her scenes were scheduled early in filming before she began to show. To hide her pregnancy later in filming, 3 stunt doubles were hired. This caused a lot of confusion amongst the other actors since, according to them, all the stunt women looked very similar to Scarlett Johansson. Chris Evans stated that it got to the point where he would say hello and start a conversation with one of them, only to realize midway that the person he was talking to wasn't Scarlett Johansson. Ultimately, some scenes were used with CGI to hide her belly. Probably smarter. You don't want to confuse your cast on the set. Because Ultron was 8 to 9 feet tall, the 5'10" James Spader had to wear an antenna-like contraption made out of a thick wire with 2 red balls attached to the top that went up his entire back and 3 feet above his head. This was done so that the cast members that shared scenes with him would have a reference point for where his eyes would be when the CGI goes up for Ultron. The 2 red balls represented the placements of Ultron's eyes. Elizabeth Olsen stated that this was actually distracting because Spader would be giving an intense performance, and out of instinct, she would look at him rather than the balls representing his eyes, much to everyone's amusement. Whenever this happened, Aaron Taylor Johnson would yell, "Red balls, look at his balls, Lizzie," at her in order to get her to look in the right direction. That's pretty fun that they had a lot of fun together. In the comics, Ultron was created by Dr. Hank Pym, who is Ant-Man. In this film, Ultron is a dormant project developed by Tony Stark, while Pym gets his own separate story in Ant-Man. So, of course, they changed it, probably because they haven't introduced Ant-Man yet. I'm totally fine with that. It makes a lot of sense for the story that they're telling in the MCU, that it's Tony that created Ultron instead of Hank Pym. Now, I know all those diehard comic book fans probably don't want to hear it changing lore in the comics, but hey, this is their vision of the MCU, and having Tony create Ultron sets up a lot of different things, and it makes sense. James Spader uses his natural speaking voice for Ultron. The voice was then processed to give it a more metallic, machine-like quality. Bruce Banner's creation that houses the extra Hulkbuster parts, Veronica, is named that as an in-joke based on the Archie comics. Archie Andrews is always torn between 2 women that love him, Betty and Veronica. Banner already had a girlfriend, of course, Betty Ross. So this armor was named Veronica as a contrast to Banner's alternate personality, the Incredible Hulk. So that's kind of the backstory on why they named it Veronica, because of the Archie comics. In the comics, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are born mutants. In this movie, they got their powers due to experimentation of Hydra on them. This change had to do with the fact that 20th Century Fox holds the rights to the X-Men film franchise and the whole mutant concept, which I've talked about already. Therefore, this change was intended to disassociate the film from the X-Men franchise to avoid legal issues. So that's how they were able to get around it, by calling them enhanced heroes instead of mutants. Marvel Ultimates comic is famous for featuring a controversial incestuous storyline between Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. According to Elizabeth Olsen, while this particular aspect would not be overtly present in the film, she and Aaron Taylor Johnson played around with certain parts of it. Every time you see an image of them, they're always holding each other's hands and looking over each other's shoulder. They're always so close, it's almost uncomfortable. Aaron and I have been playing a little bit with those kinds of images just for ourselves. And that kind of goes back to them filming Godzilla together as man and wife, husband and wife in that one. And you can tell in this one that there's a little more closer than what you should be with your twin, where they're holding hands or Quicksilver's like touching Wanda's hair a little bit in a in like a sexual way. So there's small nuances of it, and you have to really look for it. But it's kind of interesting that they actually kind of explore that idea. And if you haven't read that Ultimate Comics series about how they're like incest with each other, it's really weird. There's some dark parts of the comic book world that I would not recommend you watching or reading. In an early script, Ultron was created by the government to eliminate the need for the Avengers, but Ultron turns on its creators and the Avengers again team up to stop him. However, this shot was changed. I like the Tony aspect of it. It kind of sets up the story for Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame in a way. So I like this route, but the government one makes sense. But I really like that Tony and Bruce were the ones that made it. Kind of keep it in-house. Joss Whedon has said that he wanted Spider-Man and Captain Marvel to appear in the final sequence, but they were unable to include them in the movie due to timing and rights issues. This is interesting to say because Joss Whedon has gone on record saying that he didn't want all these characters in this movie, and that was his big gripe with Marvel, was that they kept adding characters. But then here he is on record saying he wants 2 more big characters. Like, the dude is not a good director. He doesn't know what he wants. And he just kind of goes back and forth on what he says. But having Spider-Man and Captain Marvel in here would have been too much. And I'm glad that they waited until Spider-Man for Civil War, because that made more sense in that aspect. That would have been just too much. And yeah, of course, at the time, the Spider-Man one in particular was a huge rights issue with Sony. Then lastly, James Spader was originally just going to be Ultron's voice, but he told the filmmakers that for a main character, he deserved to do more than provide a voice. And so he took on performing Ultron through motion capture, which is why they had that whole mechanism on him and everything on set. I agree with that. James Spader was right that he should have been on set. It adds to the performance. It adds to the intensity if he is there on set giving the speeches to the Avengers so that they can react in real time instead of doing voiceover. I really like it when they do that. So those are the fun facts there. It was quite lengthy, but I wanted to, there was quite a few of them that I wanted to touch up on. But yeah, the Avengers Age of Ultron is an awesome movie. I really, really like it. I think it's super underrated. I love the Ultron performance by James Spader. He was what makes this movie very entertaining. It's really, really awesome. I really, really love it. So let's end things like we always do with the ranking segment, with the MCU ranking, the villain scale, and then that popcorn rating. All right, so up first, we have the MCU ranking for Avengers Age of Ultron, and I have that at 31 is the mark I'm going to put it. I thought about moving it up a little bit, but looking at what's around it, it's tough. You know, there's some really good ones here, so I'm going to keep it at 31. Kind of below it is Black Widow at 32, Iron Man 3 at 33, Doctor Strange at 34, and then Iron Man 2 at 35. Obviously, it's not going to go below any of those. Right above it, we have the 2 seasons of Loki. Season 1 of Loki is at 29. Season 2 of Loki is at 30. Then above those, we have Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness at 28, which I really, really like. I love the battle between Doctor Strange and Wanda in there. 27, we have Werewolf by Night, which is a really awesome and very surprisingly incredibly well done special that they did. 26 is Thor Love and Thunder. That movie gets a lot of hate, but I actually enjoy it. And then the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special at 25, which I really, really like. Then, of course, like I've already mentioned, the first Avengers movie at 24. So I think Age of Ultron is right where it needs to be there at 31. Kind of smack dab in the middle there a little bit of the whole MCU. But it's really, really well done. And I absolutely love the James Spader performance by Ultron. Speaking of which, that'll get to our next thing here. And that is the villain scale for Avengers Age of Ultron, which, of course, the villain is Ultron. Again, as a reminder, we'll look at the performance, the costume design, and then the motivation behind that villain. So the performance, like I've said throughout this whole episode today, the performance is incredible. James Spader does an amazing job with his voice as well as on set with the mocap, with the rest of the cast on set. He's really, really incredible. It's one of the best performances in the MCU for sure. The costume design, I've touched up on it a little bit, where they've changed it from the comics to where they made the mouth move as he talks, whereas in the comics, it's more like the Ultron bots where it just blinks red. when it's talking. I like the fact that they changed the design to have his mouth move. It made it more of a character instead of just it being a drone or a bot walking around. I mean, it's the main villain of the movie, so I agree with them changing it. I also like the design of it, the metallic, the vibranium design of him is really, really cool. Motivation is it's pretty messed up. Where it's an AI program where it's learning, it's adapting, it's evolving, and it's got a piece of Tony in there where his version of the piece of the world is the humans. The humans are the problem, and the world needs to be made of metal. And it's really, really awesome, the motivation. And Spader kind of channels that in his performance, of where truly believes that Tony is a hypocrite, that he rids the world of weapons, but he's making weapons for himself. And it's kind of like a dictatorship and all that. And he sees the flaws in humans, and he wants to rid the world of humans so that it could all be Ultron bots, all metal, all controllable, all designed and purpose. So the motivation is definitely there. So the overall scale for the villain is 4 Thanos heads. I thought about going 5, but I couldn't quite get there. It just didn't feel like a 5 Thanos head villain. But it's at 4, and I think that's really, really awesome that it is a 4. And I'm going to stick with it there. So 4 Thanos heads is what I'm giving Ultron and Avengers Age of Ultron. Then lastly, we have the popcorn rating for Age of Ultron. And I'm giving it 4 popcorn buckets. I think that is a really good spot to put it. And that's kind of how I feel about the movie overall, is that it is a 4 popcorn bucket film. I just couldn't quite get it up to 5, but it's really, really well done and very entertaining. And it's a great Avengers story to tell. So I'm going with 4 popcorn buckets on the popcorn rating. So that will wrap up today's episode on Age of Ultron. Like I said, next week we'll cap off phase 2 of the MCU with Ant-Man, starring Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man. Really, really awesome. I've been excited to rewatch that one. I haven't seen that one in a while, and to finally do it on the show. Paul Rudd has an incredible performance as Ant-Man in the universe, and I'm really, really awesome. And then we'll jump into the phase 3 after that with Captain America Civil War, one of my favorite MCU movies ever. So a lot of great content coming up. We'll also start getting into the year's other episodes, starting off with the Gamer Verse is what I'm calling it, the Gamer Verse episodes. We're going to do Scott Pilgrim versus the World. We're going to do Ready Player One, and then we'll do Free Guy as this little mini event going on opposite the Marvel Fridays. So great stuff. Like I said, I'm pre-recording this episode since I will be in Mexico when this airs on Friday, which is today, January 16th. So a lot of fun stuff. And when I get back, we're gonna watch Ant-Man and get that going. So also check out my football podcast since I'll be in Mexico for that one as well. I'll be recording that one early, and then that would have released on Wednesday. And so if you're a football nut, go ahead and check out my football podcast show, The End Zone Report. We're going through all the playoffs currently going on right now, reacting to the wild card weekend and looking ahead to the divisional round in the playoffs. So a lot of great stuff to check out. Hit subscribe, follow on the show. It helps out a lot. Check out the social media pages. Follow those as well for all the updates and artwork from the episodes. Thank you, everyone, for supporting the show over the years, especially last year with it being the first year for the video podcast. It's been a really, really fun time. I'm looking forward to making more content for you guys. So later, everyone.